Already laughing. That's always a good
That's
sign.
absolutely.
Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Women with Good Chat. I'm here with my good buddy Pam.
Good morning, Amanda.
How are you?
I'm good today.
Good. Good to see you.
Bit suntanned.
Yes. Look at this beauty.
Bit
I
suntanned.
haven't seen her in a while. She's been traveling. So what we want to talk about today is essentially the impact of travel. You go somewhere else, especially somewhere far, far away, and you really get a sense of how different the world is from one end to the other, effectively, and how it impacts your view of what goes on at home. And where were you recently?
I was in Egypt.
Amazing.
I did a trip of a lifetime to Egypt with my aunt, and this is a trip we have wanted to do for so many years.
Amazing.
Really the fulfilling of a dream.
That's fantastic.
It was.
And you were away for how long?
I was away for almost 2 weeks.
Wow.
It was a solid 2 weeks. By the time, you lose a day getting there and getting back. So a good 11 days on the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
good 11 days on the ground. Yeah.
And where were you in Egypt?
We did your very typical tourist tour of Egypt. Started in Cairo, went up to Alexandria, then we flew down to Aswan, which is the south of Egypt, at the north, at the upper Nile, they call it, and then spent some time on a boat coming back up the Nile to Luxor, flying back to Cairo. So seeing, I think, quite a bit of the country.
Yeah,
we did a lot of
sounds like
traveling in those days.
How
yeah.
was the inter-country air travel?
Going was fine. Coming back was a real challenge. Because I haven't been in that part of the world before, I don't know whether the security we experienced was standard or much more heightened because of the political situation.
Right.
But the number of times we went through security between getting into the airport, getting to it was a lot, and the carry-on situation was very difficult because everything was searched, everything was pulled apart. So
Yeah.
that was certainly something that I just got to say, if you're doing these flights, you just really got to make sure you've got enough changeover time. Right.
Yeah, the planning is something else.
The planning is something, and there's simply nothing you can do if you've got to go through 3 security checks every time you're in an airport. So that was a bit challenging, but worth it. But you got to know that going into it, so you're not worried constantly about your connections and everything else.
Yeah, I would definitely be a human rain delay on that scenario because there's no way I'm traveling with only carry-on.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, so what is your number one takeaway, would you say?
So, I mean, other than that, Egypt is an absolutely amazing country. And if you have a chance, I would say that it is a really different experience than anywhere I've been before, simply because of the age of the monuments and sites that are there, and also because of the amazing job that the Egyptians have done in keeping those sites, from our point of view, very pure in terms of their reconstruction being non-intrusive. So it feels original to the extent that they haven't reconstructed, they have conserved. So just absolutely amazing in that way, from a historical site, from an artistic perspective. But I think most surprisingly about this trip is that I got back and I am experiencing our city, my city, which is Toronto, in a really different way.
Fascinating. And tell me why that is.
Well, I think because the cities in Egypt, to me, were extremely difficult to navigate and extremely unforgiving. Been to Morocco, where I thought the traffic patterns were difficult, but crossing the road in Egypt is just difficult. Okay, getting places, and there are wide streets, and there's a lot of traffic, and there's not the infrastructure to move around the city easily, and frankly, to enjoy the city, if that makes sense. There is public transit, and I think it functions, although there's also the kind of semi-private transit which I've only used in the Caribbean before, but there certainly is a lot of private vans that stop and
Right.
pick up people. But the idea of like going for a walk in Cairo or Alexandria or Luxor, they're just not navigable cities. You know what I mean? So that has really impressed me since I've got back, with how much we take for granted here about the infrastructure we have, garbage collection, the maintaining of sidewalks in a way that it's accessible, traffic control, the degree of air pollution there is astounding for us. I mean, we experienced it a little bit with the wildfires last summer.
For sure, yeah.
But the degree of air pollution everywhere because of lack of controls. So I don't want this to come across as a criticism. But what I would like it to come across as is a thought about us appreciating here where we are, the benefits we have. The water situation also. I mean, Egypt is essentially a desert with a river in the middle of it. And so anytime you're doing anything, water is a constant concern.
What was the water like in your hotels?
Well, no one in Egypt drinks the water there, like Mexico. No one drinks tap water in Egypt. So even if you are, walking by a local cafe, they've all got the big water bottles out. People are taking big water bottles into their homes. No one is consuming the water in Egypt.
Right.
I don't think, not even locally. So that's, kind of what that's about. But when you think about when you're driving out of Cairo, there's a movement right now in Egypt to try to establish communities outside of the city. That means all water needs to be brought there, right? It's all that.
Yeah.
So again, it is just, walking around when you've got trees and everything else, because we have rain, right?
Yeah.
The gardens in our hotel would have to be watered all of the time from a water system, which is not just a well. So all of that just makes for a certain living condition, which is not easy for people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a combination of history, where North America is so young relative to everywhere else, and geography.
Yeah. Right? And weather conditions and everything else. So that is just what I have been struck with since I've been a real sincere sense of gratitude in the livability of the city which we are in.
And how did you find, if you were walking around, let's say in Cairo, how were the people on the street?
So I think it was absolutely safe. You did not, I mean, like I said, the only thing which scared me in Egypt was crossing the street because of the traffic. No, there was no sense of ever being in peril. There was no sense of, being a tourist, being out of place, being in any way, the vendors were aggressive, but it was absolutely perfectly safe. There was none of that. But walking down the sidewalk, you're continually going around potholes and you're continually pushed onto the street. And then there's, corners with no sort of indication how you could possibly get across that street. That's what I mean about it. And, you and I have talked about this when we've talked about traveling, the traveling I do to other cities, and I try to walk and I try to use public transit. This was not a friendly city for any of that. It was simply not.
It's interesting because my relatable experience would be I did about a month in Beijing and traveled outside of Beijing as well on some very interesting airlines, I might add. No automation, all handwritten tickets. Very cool. But crossing the street there was terrifying, and there were international students, and I would find them in packs waiting to cross the street.
Absolutely.
So I would cross with them.
Exactly.
So I figured they'll probably hit them before they hit me.
That's right.
At least I have some insulation.
That's right.
But the driving was insane. And I know I've heard it's insane in India as well. So there you go.
Absolutely. And I think the thing is that there is this, there's the drive to build modern roadways, which we would consider to be limited access highways going through the city. But of course, the people can't live like that because they can't walk 3 miles to get to an overpass. So what happens is you still have like the donkey carts on a road we would consider to be a limited access highway, along with children crossing and old people crossing. Now, we never saw anything happen, although I think every car in Alexandria had damage on it. But I never saw anything happen, but it was really quite astounding, the pedestrian car interaction. So that was, and that even just in itself is a bit disconcerting. I mean, we took I learned that strategy a bit in Istanbul, where you simply just wait until there's 1 or 2 locals gathered, and then you just kind of, as a matter of fact, in Egypt, we actually ask people if they could help us cross, right? We just say, can we cross with you? And they said, yeah. And
were you able to find people that spoke English?
English was really well spoken. To be frank, yeah. Now, again, I don't think I didn't penetrate anything into what you would call Egyptian society, although my aunt who I went with smokes. And
so that's culturally acceptable there.
Really, I mean, we're in the situation again where like you're sitting in a restaurant here and then the smoking section's one table. Like it's the 70s. It is the 70s. But what that made us do is we would actually she'd go for cigarette, we'd get to meet local people, and then we also had to, forge a bit to get her cigarettes. So that actually took us into convenience stores and this and that and this. So we actually did get out a bit into that thing. So I saw a bit of that. And I think as tourists in some of those places, we were a bit like an animal in a zoo. Like, what's that? Not in a threatening way, but just like, we don't get a lot of you in our show.
Exactly.
So I didn't get a lot of crossover that way. Say, like when I was in Turkey, I was much more into that. So I can't say I got a big sense of that. But certainly the safety, totally. There was never any sense that at any point in time when you're walking down the street, you're in danger from anything but the traffic.
Yeah, exactly.
Or falling into potholes.
Well, that's good, because I was a little concerned about the international situation.
Yes,
so
I'm
no, glad you lived to tell the tale.
We did. Although one thing it did do is it was not as crowded as it could have been.
Right.
So not that I'm suggesting traveling to countries when they're
on
the verge of a war zone,
yeah.
But it does cut down in the tour.
There you go. The moral of the story is, where is the war?
Where is the war? That's where we're going.
And maybe take up smoking. Just a thought.
We met a lot of interesting people out smoking. We did.
Well, listen, this is fascinating, and I would love to actually touch on more of this because I have a million questions.
Okay.
So I think we might have to do an episode 2 of this.
All right.
And amazing. Lots of interesting information. Can't wait for part 2. We look forward to seeing you next time. And as always, drop some comments. I mean, this is a pretty loaded episode. Let us know what you think. We look forward to seeing you next time. Love seeing you, honey.
Okay.
And bye.
Chat soon.